Are you taking amlodipine right now? Maybe you've been on it for months, maybe years, and you feel like you have it under control. You take it at the same time every day. You've read the label. You think you know the rules. But here's what almost no one tells you. There are foods sitting in your kitchen right now, foods you've eaten your entire life, foods that feel healthy or harmless or even medicinal that can change the way amlodipine works inside your body in ways that range from uncomfortable to genuinely dangerous. And the worst part is the interaction doesn't always announce itself dramatically. It hides inside symptoms that feel like ordinary aging, fatigue, dizziness, a racing heartbeat, a strange heaviness in the legs. And because those symptoms feel familiar, most seniors never connect them to what they ate for breakfast or dinner. I'm Dr. James Mercer, and today we're going to talk about exactly that. We are going to go through the foods and substances that interact with amlodipine in ways that most patients are never warned about. We will look at what happens inside the body, why it matters especially for seniors, and what you need to know to protect yourself. And I'll share real patient stories along the way, because this is not theoretical. I have watched these interactions cause real confusion, real falls, real hospital visits, and real fear in people who were doing everything they thought was right. Stay until the end because the last interaction on this list is one that almost every senior over 65 is exposed to regularly, and it may be the one your doctor has never once mentioned. So let me begin with something that surprised even some of my colleagues when the clinical evidence started coming in clearly. And I want to start here because it touches on a food that millions of Americans consider one of the healthiest things they can put in their body. Margaret was 68 years old, a retired school teacher from Ohio, sharp, careful, and deeply health conscious. She had been on amlodipine for 2 years without any significant issues. Her blood pressure was controlled. Her doctor was pleased. Then Margaret decided to add a morning wellness routine. She started drinking 2 large glasses of freshly squeezed grapefruit juice every day, something she had read about online for its antioxidants and vitamin C. Within 3 weeks, Margaret started waking up dizzy, not mildly dizzy, the kind of dizzy where the room tilts when you sit up in bed. She developed flushing across her face and neck, a pounding headache by mid-morning, and her heart felt like it was beating too hard, too fast, like it was working overtime for no reason. She assumed she was coming down with a viral infection. She rested more, she drank more juice, and the symptoms got worse. What was happening inside Margaret's body is one of the most important drug-food interactions in cardiovascular medicine, and it involves a compound found in grapefruit called furanocoumarins. Amlodipine is broken down by your liver using a specific enzyme called CYP3A4. That enzyme is your body's way of metabolizing the medication, processing it, and moving it through your system at the correct rate. Grapefruit, and specifically grapefruit juice, contains compounds that partially block that enzyme. When CYP3A4 is blocked, your body cannot process amlodipine at its normal rate. The medication builds up. Blood levels rise higher than intended. And what happens when the dose of a blood pressure medication becomes effectively larger than prescribed? Blood pressure drops further than it should. Blood vessels dilate more aggressively. The heart has to work harder to compensate. And the symptoms that arrive are exactly what Margaret experienced: dizziness, flushing, palpitations, headaches, and a general feeling of being unwell that is hard to name but impossible to ignore. This is not a minor interaction. The effect of grapefruit on amlodipine can increase the drug's concentration in the blood meaningfully. And in older adults whose cardiovascular systems have less reserve and whose blood pressure regulation is already more sensitive, that increase can tip the balance from therapeutic to harmful. Margaret's doctor eventually traced the problem back to the grapefruit juice. When she stopped it, her symptoms resolved within days. But she had spent 3 weeks frightened, confused, and more exhausted than she had been in years. Here is what matters most about this interaction. It is not just fresh grapefruit juice. It is any form of grapefruit. A whole grapefruit eaten with breakfast, pink grapefruit, white grapefruit, grapefruit segments from a can, grapefruit-flavored drinks that contain real grapefruit extract, marmalade made with grapefruit, even certain herbal teas that contain grapefruit peel. The furanocoumarins are present in all of them, and they do not disappear when the fruit is processed. And here is the part that makes this interaction particularly deceptive. the effect can linger. Because these compounds irreversibly inhibit the enzyme rather than simply competing with it, eating grapefruit even 12 or 24 hours before taking amlodipine can still affect how the medication is processed. You cannot simply time your grapefruit intake around your pill. You have to eliminate it while you are on this medication, or have a direct conversation with your doctor about whether the interaction is clinically significant in your specific case. Now let's talk about something that lives not in the produce section, but in a bottle, and something that many seniors use in far greater quantities than they realize. And this is where I need to tell you about Frank. Frank was 71 years old, a retired contractor from Pennsylvania, broad-shouldered and stubborn in the way that men of his generation often are about admitting when something is wrong. He had been on amlodipine for a year and a half. His blood pressure had been running a little high, so his doctor had recently increased his dose. Around the same time, Frank had started having what he called a nightcap before bed, a glass of red wine, sometimes two. It helped him sleep, he said. It was good for the heart, he said. He'd read that somewhere. Within 6 weeks of the dose increase and the nightly wine habit running together, Frank's family noticed something troubling. He was unsteady on his feet in the evenings. He was reaching for furniture when he walked through the living room after dinner. One night, his daughter watched him stand up from his armchair too quickly and nearly go down entirely, catching himself on the arm of the sofa with both hands. He laughed it off. She did not. Alcohol and amlodipine interact in a way that is not complicated to understand once you know what you are looking at. Amlodipine works by relaxing and widening blood vessels. Alcohol also relaxes blood vessels. When you combine the two, the blood pressure lowering effect becomes additive and, in some people, more than additive. Blood pressure can fall further and faster than either substance would cause alone. And when blood pressure falls suddenly, especially in older adults who are already rising from a chair or a bed or who have had their dose recently increased, the result is positional hypotension, the dizziness that comes on when you stand, the moment where the vision dims at the edges, the sudden weakness in the legs. For seniors, that moment is when falls happen, falls that lead to hip fractures that lead, in too many cases, to a cascade of complications from which older adults do not recover. Frank's doctor put the picture together at his next appointment. The dose increase combined with regular evening alcohol was creating a dangerous blood pressure pattern in the hours after dinner, exactly the hours when Frank was most active around the house, most likely to be standing and moving, and least likely to be cautious. Frank stopped the nightly wine. His stability returned within a week, but for 6 weeks he had been at significant risk for a serious fall and had not known it. And he is not unusual. Many seniors have a glass of wine or beer in the evening. Many seniors are on amlodipine. Many of those seniors have never been told that the combination can amplify the blood pressure lowering effect in a way that makes the evening hours genuinely risky. The rule here is not that a senior on amlodipine can never consume alcohol again. It is that alcohol and amlodipine interact, that the interaction is enhanced by dose changes, by dehydration, by hot weather, by eating very little, and by getting up quickly. If you drink regularly and take amlodipine, that pattern deserves a direct conversation with your prescribing doctor, not a vague mention. A specific, honest accounting of what you drink, how much, and when. Because your doctor cannot account for a variable they do not know exists in your life. Now, I want to spend time on something that I think is the most counterintuitive interaction on this entire list, because it involves a food category that almost every health-conscious senior is actively encouraged to eat more of. And the interaction doesn't make the medication too strong. It pushes blood pressure in the wrong direction in a way that's subtle but real, and it's something I see contributing to confusion in patient management more often than most physicians would admit. Doris was 66 years old, a retired nurse from Georgia, and if anyone should have known better, you might think it was her. But the interaction she encountered is one that even many healthcare providers are not fully aware of. Doris had been on amlodipine for blood pressure control for about 18 months. Her readings had been decent. Then she had a health scare unrelated to her heart, a family history conversation that frightened her, and she made a major dietary overhaul. She started eating an enormous amount of high-fiber foods. Specifically, she added large daily servings of oat bran, flaxseed meal, psyllium husk fiber supplements from a product called Metamucil, which she bought at her local Walmart or CVS, and whole wheat bread at every meal. She was doing everything right from a general health standpoint. But within 2 months, her blood pressure readings at her doctor's office started looking higher than they had in over a year. Her doctor considered increasing her amlodipine dose. Doris was confused and discouraged. What was happening is this: very high fiber intake, particularly from soluble fiber supplements taken close in time to medication, can potentially affect the absorption of some orally taken medications. The fiber creates bulk in the gastrointestinal tract and can, in certain circumstances, bind to or speed transit past the point where the medication is best absorbed. While amlodipine is generally well absorbed, sudden dramatic increases in dietary fiber, especially from concentrated supplement sources like Metamucil or Benefiber taken within an hour or two of medication, are worth factoring into a medication management conversation. Doris was taking her psyllium husk drink with the same glass of water as her amlodipine every single morning. When she spread them apart by at least 2 hours, her blood pressure numbers began to stabilize again. The lesson here is not to stop eating fiber. Fiber is valuable and important, especially for cardiovascular health. The lesson is that timing matters, and that a major dietary change, even a healthy one, can interact with a medication's absorption window in ways that produce confusing clinical pictures. If you have started a high-fiber supplement like Metamucil, Benefiber, or store-brand psyllium husk from Target or Walgreens, and you take it at the same time as amlodipine, talk to your pharmacist about spacing them appropriately. And now I want to tell you about something that comes in a small blue and white canister that lives in almost every American kitchen, and something that seniors are often specifically told to increase their intake of for bone health, muscle function, and heart health: calcium. Specifically, calcium supplements. Norman was 73 years old, a retired accountant from Michigan, meticulous, organized, and diligent about his health. His wife had been diagnosed with osteoporosis, and Norman, worried about his own bones, started taking calcium carbonate supplements. He bought Caltrate 600 plus D3 from his local pharmacy, a widely available and well-regarded supplement. He took it faithfully twice a day, because that's what the label suggested. What Norman did not know, and what his cardiologist had not specifically discussed with him, is that calcium channel blockers like amlodipine work by blocking the entry of calcium into smooth muscle cells in blood vessel walls, which causes those walls to relax and the vessels to widen, which lowers blood pressure. When you supplement heavily with calcium, you are introducing additional calcium into the body. In theory and in some clinical observations, very high calcium intake can partially compete with or modify the environment in which a calcium channel blocker is working. Norman's blood pressure started running a little higher than his previous baseline, nothing dramatic, but enough to concern his doctor and prompt a discussion about dose adjustment. When Norman's cardiologist asked about supplements and Norman listed the Caltrate, a conversation happened that led to spacing the supplement and the medication apart, reducing the calcium supplement dose, and getting calcium intake primarily through dietary sources, like low-fat dairy, leafy greens, and fortified foods instead. His numbers came back down without a dose change. The interaction between calcium supplements and amlodipine is not always clinically significant for every patient. But it is a conversation that should happen, and it almost never does, because most doctors and most patients do not think of supplements as things that interact with prescriptions. Norman's story is important precisely because he was doing something recommended for his age and health. And doing something recommended is not the same as doing something that has no effect on your medication. If you are taking calcium carbonate from Caltrate, Oscal, Viactive, or any generic calcium supplement from Costco, Walgreens, CVS, or your supermarket pharmacy section, and you are also on amlodipine, tell your prescribing physician exactly what you are taking and when. They may simply tell you to separate the timing. They may review whether your supplement dose makes sense given your diet. Either way, the conversation needs to happen. Now let's talk about something that sits in the produce section and that many seniors add to their diets after reading about its cardiovascular benefits. and it has a relationship with amlodipine that is more nuanced than most online health articles will ever acknowledge. Beverly was 69 years old, a retired social worker from Oregon, energetic, informed, and serious about eating well. She read extensively about heart health and came across a great deal of research on the benefits of dark leafy greens for blood pressure, particularly spinach, kale, Swiss chard, and collard greens. She started eating large salads twice a day. She added spinach to her morning smoothie. She made kale chips in the oven. From a nutritional standpoint, she was making excellent choices. But Beverly was also on a blood thinner prescribed separately from her amlodipine. And in addition to the blood thinner interaction that her pharmacist had warned her about regarding vitamin K in leafy greens, something else happened that her team did not initially anticipate. Beverly's blood pressure started running lower than her target range. Not dangerously low, but consistently low enough that she felt lightheaded after meals and unsteady in the mornings. Dark leafy greens, particularly when consumed in very large quantities, contain minerals and compounds including magnesium and potassium that have their own mild blood pressure lowering effects. When those effects run alongside the blood pressure lowering effect of amlodipine, the combination can push pressure lower than the medication alone would. For most people, this is not a problem and may even be beneficial. But for seniors who are already at the lower end of their target blood pressure range, or who are taking multiple cardiovascular medications, a sudden dramatic increase in the daily consumption of high potassium, high magnesium foods can shift the balance in a way that produces symptoms. Beverly's doctor reviewed her medication and her diet together and adjusted her monitoring schedule. Beverly was not asked to give up her vegetables. She was asked to be consistent with her portions and to report any dizziness or lightheadedness after major meal changes. The lesson is this: healthy foods are not neutral in the context of prescription medication. They have biological activity. That activity can be additive with medication effects. If you have made a recent major dietary change toward large quantities of any particular food, including foods considered healthy, and your blood pressure readings have shifted, those two facts are worth discussing together with your doctor. They may be unrelated, but they may be connected in ways that affect your medication management. And now I want to talk about sodium, because sodium management for seniors on amlodipine is more complicated than a simple eat less salt message. And a mistake that looks like health consciousness can actually work against blood pressure control in ways that are rarely explained clearly. Arthur was 75 years old, a retired firefighter from Texas, tough, disciplined, and determined after his diagnosis to do everything right. His doctor told him to cut sodium, so Arthur cut it aggressively. He stopped cooking with salt entirely. He switched to a salt substitute. Specifically, he started using new salt and Morton salt substitute, both of which are available at most grocery stores, including H-E-B, Kroger, and Walmart. What Arthur did not know is that both of these products replace sodium chloride with potassium chloride to achieve a salty flavor. Potassium chloride looks like salt, pours like salt, tastes somewhat like salt, but it is not salt from a medication standpoint. Amlodipine itself does not directly interact with potassium in the way that some other blood pressure medications do. But Arthur was not only on amlodipine. He had been started on a companion medication for his blood pressure management, and even in isolation, very high potassium intake from heavy use of potassium-based salt substitutes can affect electrolyte balance, kidney function, and the broader physiological environment in which all cardiovascular medications operate. Arthur developed muscle weakness, occasional palpitations, and a strange fatigue that came on in the afternoon. When his blood work came back, his potassium was elevated. His doctor had a long conversation with him about the salt substitute and adjusted his approach to sodium management to focus on avoiding processed foods rather than using high potassium replacement products. If you are using new salt, Morton salt substitute, also salt, or any potassium chloride-based salt replacement as a health strategy while managing your blood pressure with amlodipine or any combination of medications, please tell your doctor and pharmacist specifically what you are using. It needs to be on the table in any medication review conversation. Now, I want to tell you about something that a significant percentage of American seniors consume daily, something that is culturally embedded and emotionally meaningful, something that most people would never think of as interacting with a heart medication, And this is the interaction I promised you at the start. The one that affects nearly every senior over 65, the one most doctors have never once mentioned. It is caffeine, specifically regular daily coffee, the kind that almost every senior in this country has been drinking since they were in their 20s or 30s. The morning ritual, the social comfort, the thing that makes the early hours feel manageable. Eleanor was 70 years old, a retired librarian from Connecticut, quiet, thoughtful, and precise. She had been on amlodipine for 3 years without complaint. Her blood pressure was well managed. Then Eleanor moved in with her daughter temporarily after a minor procedure, and during that stay, she began drinking her daughter's coffee instead of her own. Her daughter, who worked from home and needed strong coffee to stay alert, brewed what Eleanor described as extremely powerful coffee, twice as strong as what Eleanor was used to. Within about a week of the move, Eleanor started experiencing unusual heart sensations. Her heart felt like it was racing at irregular intervals. She felt more anxious than she had in years. Her blood pressure readings in the morning were higher than they had been in a long time, which confused her because she was still taking her amlodipine exactly as prescribed. Caffeine stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. It causes a temporary increase in blood pressure and heart rate. Amlodipine is working to lower blood pressure and relax blood vessels. When you consume large amounts of caffeine, particularly concentrated caffeine from very strong coffee or from caffeine supplements, you are introducing a countervailing stimulus to the very system your medication is trying to calm. The two are not violently incompatible in moderate amounts. Most seniors who have 1 or 2 cups of regular coffee per day and take amlodipine do not experience significant problems. But when caffeine intake increases substantially, or when it shifts to more concentrated forms, it can work against the medication's effect in a way that shows up in morning blood pressure readings and in heart rhythm symptoms. Eleanor's case resolved when she returned to her own home and her own much lighter coffee. But the more important point is what Eleanor's story reveals about how many seniors manage their coffee intake without ever factoring it into their blood pressure picture. If your morning blood pressure readings are consistently higher than expected and you drink coffee, that is a variable worth discussing. Switching from regular to a medium roast, reducing to 1 cup before medication, having the coffee after the pill has had time to begin absorbing. These are adjustments worth exploring with your doctor or pharmacist, and they cost nothing except a minor change to a habit. I also want to spend a moment on licorice, not the licorice candy you buy in a grocery store checkout line, which in the United States typically contains anise flavoring rather than real licorice root. I am talking about real black licorice, which contains a compound called glycyrrhizin, and about licorice root supplements, which are sold in health food stores and online through Amazon and iHerb under brands like Nature's Way Licorice Root and Gaia Herbs Licorice Root Liquid Phytocapsules. Glycyrrhizin can cause the body to retain sodium and lose potassium, which raises blood pressure. For someone on amlodipine trying to manage blood pressure, even moderate regular consumption of genuine licorice root can partially undermine the medication's work. This interaction is not widely discussed, but it is real and it is documented. If you consume authentic black licorice regularly, or take licorice root as an herbal supplement, tell your prescriber. And now I want to bring all of this together because the point of everything we have discussed today is not to leave you frightened of your kitchen. It is to give you a framework for thinking about your medication within the full context of your daily life, not just within the confines of a pharmacy label. Walter was 67 years old, a retired engineer from Washington State, analytical by nature and determined to understand every system he was part of, including his own body. When he was placed on amlodipine, he came to his follow-up appointment with a notebook. He had written down everything he ate regularly, every supplement he took, every beverage he drank, every over-the-counter product he used. His doctor later told him it was one of the most useful appointments she had ever had with a new medication patient, not because his list revealed anything alarming, but because it allowed her to map his medication into his actual life rather than into a theoretical average patient's life. Walter had no significant interactions to worry about, but because of that conversation, he knew why. He was not assuming safety. He had verified it. And that distinction matters enormously. The difference between a senior who is safe on amlodipine and a senior who is unsafe on amlodipine is often not the medication itself. It is the information gap between what the prescriber knows and what is actually happening in the patient's daily environment. Grapefruit is in the fruit bowl. Alcohol is at the dinner table. Salt substitutes are in the kitchen cabinet. Calcium supplements are in the morning pill organizer. Caffeine is in the first cup of the day. Licorice root is in the herbal supplement cabinet. Fiber supplements are next to the vitamins. None of these feels like a medical variable. All of them can be. Here is the practical checklist I want every senior on amlodipine to carry mentally. Avoid grapefruit and grapefruit juice entirely while on this medication. Do not assume timing around the grapefruit will protect you. Speak honestly with your doctor about alcohol consumption, especially if your dose has recently changed, if you are drinking in the evening, or if you have noticed new unsteadiness. If you take a fiber supplement like Metamucil or Benefiber, space it at least 2 hours from your amlodipine dose. Tell your prescriber about calcium supplements like Caltrate or Oscal, specifically when you take them relative to your medication. If you have made major dietary changes toward large quantities of any particular food group, including healthy foods, and your blood pressure pattern has shifted, connect those two facts in your next appointment. Review whether any salt substitute in your kitchen contains potassium chloride. It will say so on the label. If it does, that information belongs in your medication conversation. If your caffeine intake has changed significantly, or if your morning readings are puzzling your doctor, caffeine is a variable worth examining honestly. Avoid licorice root supplements and regular authentic black licorice while taking antihypertensive medications. And there is a second part of this checklist that is just as important. Bring a written list of everything you take and consume regularly to every medical appointment, not just your prescriptions. Your supplements, your herbal teas, your protein powders, your fiber drinks, your salt substitutes, your vitamins. The doctor cannot account for what they do not know about, and a pharmacist can review that list with more depth and more speed than you might expect. Many pharmacies offer medication review appointments at no charge. They exist precisely for this purpose. I want to say one more thing directly to seniors who live alone or who manage their own health without a lot of support nearby. You are not expected to be a pharmacologist. You are not expected to memorize interaction databases. But you are the person who knows what you actually eat, drink, and supplement. You are the only one with full visibility into your daily life. Your doctor sees you for minutes. Your pharmacist sees you for seconds. The hours in between are yours. And that is where the interactions happen. In the morning kitchen, at the dinner table, in the evening before bed, in the supplement cabinet that you open every day without thinking. If something has changed and you are not sure whether it matters, it costs you nothing to mention it. If a symptom has appeared and you cannot explain it, the explanation may be in the contents of your refrigerator or your supplement cabinet rather than in a new medical condition. The most powerful thing you can do is be a complete and honest reporter of your own daily life to the people who are managing your medication. Amlodipine is a valuable medication. It prevents strokes. It prevents heart complications. It helps millions of seniors live longer and more comfortably. The goal today is not to make you afraid of it. The goal is to help you take it in a way that is truly safe, which means taking it with full awareness of the environment it is entering every single day. Stay well, stay informed, and I will see you in the next one.